Hello and welcome to Media Monitor, the show that looks at how the media has covered stories throughout the week. My name is Bongikwala, your host for today's show. I'm in for Peter Ndoro, who's currently in Zimbabwe, and will be unpacking the state of the media in Zimbabwe. We will touch base with Peter a little later on the show. With that said, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. Here's what you can look forward to on today's show. We'll start off by looking at the National Women's Day celebrations coverage this past Thursday. As usual, we will take a look at what topics have been trending on social media. And lastly, we'll be crossing to Peter in Harare, Zimbabwe. On the 9th of August, South Africa celebrates the women of 1956 who broke apartheid barriers and marched to union buildings to protest the past laws. This year marks the 62nd anniversary of the historic event. But today, women in South Africa have a different struggle, battling gender-based violence. Analysts say the country is facing a crisis with the rise of violence against women. What is the media's role in reporting on gender-based violence? All right, we'll try and unpack this, and for this discussion we're joined by Professor Glenda Daniels, who is the Media Studies Wits University and Chair of SANEF's Diversity and Ethics Committee. We'll also have a research associate, Lisa Vetten, from the organization Wits University Institute for Social and Economic Research. Good morning to both of you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
All right, let me start with you, Glenda, then. From SANEF's point of view, how do you look at the developments, how the media has covered this historic event, but the entire month, how it started, and on Thursday, on the 9th, what happened, and what is your view with the rest of the month?
Look, before August 9th, SANEF called for all editors and news desks, media companies to use only women experts and to focus on the crisis, the violence against women, rape and murder against women. And, you know, rather than the fluffy stuff, which often is what happens during August, Women's Month, and, you know, feminists and SANEF get embarrassed about. Alas, we were very disappointed because we found our phones were not ringing all day for comment. You know, and news and media houses did the same old thing, exactly what we were asking them not to do. So I'm not sure how difficult it is, what the institutional cultures are that are hard to break, the kind of domination that exists. I'm not sure what's going on. I mean, I come from the newsroom myself, you know, previously. So
women experts will come then and give opinion on this particular issue and direct the conversation. Is that what you were asking for?
Yes, we were asking for more voices of women in the media to try and make sense, to try and give analysis rather than just opinion, some analysis about what's going on, why we're experiencing this, what we can do about this. It's a scourge. It's beyond a crisis, actually. It's so terrible that women are getting killed all the time and that we can't see, we seem to get worse every year. Only 21% of voices in media, especially print media, Media Monitoring Africa just came out with their research. Only 21% of voices in general are women's voices. And the reportage last year in 2017 went down in Women's Month on gender-based violence. This year I have a feeling it will go up because of total shutdown. So every little protest is important. It's not a little protest, it's an important protest, whether it's a solar protest, whether it's a whole lot of women on the total shutdown march. It's just so important to be raising some kind of awareness, every kind of awareness that's possible.
Yeah. Let me bring you in here, Lisa, then, because I'm looking at three crises right now, as Glenda is saying. I mean, you've been in the field for over 20 years. The first one is that it is still happening, and it's happening at an alarming rate every day. The second one is that SANEF, the authority in media, says, let's use women experts, and that doesn't happen in a great deal. And thirdly, as she points out, last year, the reportage around these issues, particularly in Women's Month, went down. So three crises. How do we deal with that?
I think there are a range of different things that we need to do. The first is I would start with educating journalists on how to understand statistics, because there's a lot of misrepresentation and an assumption that there is an increase if you look more closely, that's not necessarily what the statistics are saying. And if there is a crisis, it's that the crisis is in our statistics, that they are so utterly appalling, and that we accept them unquestionably, and that we do not demand better statistics. Because I must say, from the analysis I've been doing over the last few years, I'm not convinced that it's increasing to the rate that we say it is. This leaves us absolutely nowhere in terms of what it is that we need to be doing and where we need to focus our energies. So I'd like to see the media focus on training journalists how to understand statistics properly and how to go and challenge and question people who put out dubious statistics, because that's not helping. Because in some ways, to say we're in a crisis suggests that this is something new. It isn't. It's the norm. Again, if you look at the history of South Africa over the last 30 years, the figures have been high constantly. So I think we need to step away from the language of crisis and actually talk to what is it that makes us so entrenched? Why is it that we say the same things every year? How is it that our public discourse and our public thinking hasn't moved on? And so I'd like to emphasize what Glenda is saying about the need for some analysis rather than just opinion as to why we keep going through these panics every couple of years.
So who is churning out these figures? Where do these figures come from? Do they come from a central point? Do they come from the police, so that at least the media will know where to go? Or they come from all different sources? They
come from all sorts of different sources. So we have, I'll use some of the most recent figures that have been put out. We have the police saying that the number of rapes being reported to them is going down, but they can't tell us what's going on in relation to women and murder. Now you have Stats SA that just released their statistics that said actually rape is going up, and there's a very high degree of underreporting going on. And they're saying murder is also going up. But if you look at the figures they've used for murder, there's 6,000 fewer murders in their study than there are in the police's. So we need to have the kind of analysis and questioning in the media that says, what is going on here? Why are we creating fear when perhaps we don't need to be quite as frightened as we are? Or on the other hand, why are we not demanding proper answers so that we can formulate a meaningful response to the problem?
Okay, I want us to go back to the newspapers and see how some of them covered this event over the on Thursday in particular. I want us to start in the Eastern Cape. We'll look at the Daily Dispatch there. Daily Dispatch ran with the story that says teen holds brave solo city protest. It's a grade 11 pupil who stood at the traffic circle for 5 hours carrying a placard that read, "Rape is murder." She had other placards with the names of other gender-based violence victims. Remember River Steenkamp, Cindy Mangele, Kwezi Fezegile, Kuzwayo, Kensani Maseko. That's in the Eastern Cape. We come to Gauteng now, where we look at the Sowetan. It led with the story, "The struggle is far from over." So, okay, just note these headlines. The first one says, "Teen holds brave, solo city protest." This one by the Sowetan, "The struggle is far from over. Tales of rape survivors. A female doctor told to shut up by a man who brought his child to the Leratong hospital. The doctor has since laid a charge of intimidation." We go to the Citizen. Cyril, "Stop the war on women," reads the headline there. President Ramaphosa says men must be ashamed about abuse against women. And then let's go to Pretoria News now. Pretoria News, "End war on women." Again, Citizen and Pretoria News, pretty much the same headline there. Ramaphosa calls for an end to violent war on women. He announced that a summit will be held at the end of August to find ways to stop violence against women. And then if we go to the Western Cape, Cape August led with a "Stop assault on women." Ramaphosa calling on end to violent war on women, says he will hold a summit at the end of August to find ways to stop violence against women. Just some of the stories there. I think we have one more. Just some of this, how the newspapers covered these stories. Okay, so let me come back to you then. Let me start with you then, Glenda. Looking at these headlines, do you get the sense that the media did enough, or it could have done more?
I get a sense that I think the media is actually then trying to make an effort to raise awareness of the issue. I mean, I would disagree with Lisa when she says it's not a crisis. For me, it's a crisis if one girl, one student gets raped and murdered and then commits suicide. The Kenzani story.
Yes.
So it doesn't really matter whether the numbers have gone up or have gone down. I think we do need an analysis of numbers for sure. You know, we can get those analysis about how many people are getting convicted for rape and murder. That's not hard to find, and that's not hard to analyze. But, you know, when you read out the headlines like this, my feeling is that the media certainly did make an effort to raise the flag about gender-based violence rather than just do celebrations of stories of women doctors, women professors, women engineers, which they often will do, you know, just a celebration of the women's success stories on August the 9th, and then it's all over.
That's my question exactly next. Do we do it once in August on the 9th? Because it seems to be the trend. And how should we do it throughout the year? Does the media then need to immerse itself in the feelings and feel it?
Yes.
Or should the media then, you know, remove its feelings from the events and just report objectively above the feelings?
No, I honestly don't think
you need to
media
attach your feelings then?
Yes, you have to attach your feelings. You have to have empathy when you're dealing with gender-based violence. It's not about, I'm completely separate from this story, from this woman who's been raped, from this child who's been raped, from the mother who's had a daughter who's been raped. And when you're a woman reporter or a man reporter and you're dealing with the issue, one's got to try and somehow convey to society the pain, the hurt, the agony that people are feeling, the trauma, the loss.
So you become part of the story yourself.
You become part of the story. And I think this is one issue where you can become part of the story, where you can do advocacy journalism. There's a place for advocacy journalism.
Yeah.
And I think too often, you know, we go around as reporters running around getting a comment here and a comment there, she said this, he said that, and you splashed your story in the paper. But because this is such a serious, for me it is a serious crisis. It's just, you know, awful that there's this backlash. I view it as a backlash against women because we had certain gains post-apartheid with women in positions of power, women in newsrooms as editors, and now I see a backlash in terms of numbers and in terms of what my research has shown. All
right. Lisa, we hear a great deal about the victims, but we don't get to hear a great deal about the perpetrators. Same in the story of Kinsani, but also young students, young female students in Rhodes raised this particular issue, and they even brandished the names of the alleged perpetrators. We've not heard so much about those alleged perpetrators. Does this then, you know, perpetuates the stereotypes?
You know, I think that's a very difficult comment to judge, because in some ways, when I look at some of the research that I've been doing, there's a great deal of emphasis on perpetrators. I think the problem is that we're either talking about victims or perpetrators. We sit and tell stories. When we tell stories about victims, they're usually about how damaged they are, how destroyed this has been. In some ways, that's not very helpful because it reinforces the idea that rape is the end of the world. Now, one spends an awful amount of time in counselling and trying to help women not to feel that their lives have come to an end and that they've been utterly damaged. When we talk about perpetrators, we tend to have very little to say about them beyond the fact that we name them. Who they are, why they do it, we don't do that. I would like us to move beyond just telling stories, horror stories, to actually analysing why this is going on. So it would have been very useful to have, you know, I actually would like to challenge the media to start writing about what are the policy issues. We can't keep telling horror stories. We have to say, why do the police not do things? What is it that the police need to do differently? What is happening in our courts? What do the courts need to do differently? That's completely absent. All we have is this endless stream of stories all the time, and people don't really know what to make of that.
So we've become reactive as opposed to proactive then as the media?
Well, I think you tell horror stories. You don't provide any understanding of why is this going on and what is it that we can do. And it's beyond just things like telling men, putting men's names out in public. Naming and shaming is just, you can go just so far with naming and shaming. We have to look at the policy issues. So it's very nice that the president stands up and says, stop the war on women. He's the first person who can go and do something about it. We're going to have a look at his government departments and take them to task for what they are not doing. So I don't want to hear slogans like stop the war on women. I want to hear what I have done in the police today, what I am going to do in the Department of Social Development tomorrow to fix up the problems, because we know what the problems are.
But Glenda, by its very nature, the media really is about headlines. It's bite them, chew and spit. That's it.
Well,
so we're driven by that in the main.
It's not quite as bad as that, but I just want to go back to what Lisa said about the president and his departments. Absolutely. You know, why do we have a women's ministry that can't do the work for women? we have somebody who's just not good enough to be there in that department. She should be advocating, she should be doing a whole lot of things, telling us what the policy, we haven't even heard her voice in August so far.
Okay, let's pause here for now.
And headlines are important as well to catch people's attention. So I don't
and
want
how
to
you phrase it also.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Glenda Daniels, SANEF Diversity Ethics Committee Chair, and also Lisa Vetten is a gender violence specialist at VETS. And so we're going to leave it for now. Media Monitor returns shortly.
We don't want any death. All traditional places must be centers to govern and administer initiatives.
The agenda is to collapse what was once the leading electricity producer in the whole world.
I'm still waiting for him to go lay charges against anybody.
I have.
And that's what I'm saying.
SABC News celebrates Women's Month.
Welcome back. Let's now take a look at what the trending stories were on social media this past week. The insert was compiled by SABC Digital News.
Welcome to this week's social media wrap, where we look at the major trends of the week. Hashtag ProKid dominates social media as South Africa entertainment industry pays tributes to yet another fallen hip-hop star, Ndoro Mkhize, known as ProKid. He died on Wednesday night after suffering a seizure. His family says he was visiting friends when the seizure occurred. The 37-year-old artist produced hits such as Utiningo Pro and Segele. Fans and colleagues in the music industry have taken to social media with tributes to the artist. Another sad news was the hashtag Kensani Maseko, the Rhodes University student who committed suicide as she was laid to rest. Our social media expert Tanya Corey unpacks the reach.
Kensani Maseko is a bigger story than total shutdown over the past 7 days. It swamps the story of total shutdown by 83.3%, and the story is growing by almost 600% every hour upon hour, while total shutdown is reducing by 62% every hour. There are other interesting statistics out of the story. People are engaging at a phenomenal rate. 300,000 people are interacting on any one of the mentions of the 95,000 mentions we spoke about earlier. When they respond, 61% of them are negative in their response. And this particular story is sitting with a net sentiment rating. So here we measure the sentiment from minus 100 to 100 with a net sentiment rating of minus 83.59%, making it one of the biggest negative stories to come out of South Africa over the past couple of months. It's also fascinating to see that most of the statistics are fairly split between gender in our country. So it's not just women talking about the story. 59.5% comes from women and 40.5% comes from men. Men are equally as outraged as women are.
South Africa celebrated National Women's Day this week with keynote address delivered by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Citizens took to Twitter calling for women to be respected and some calling for delivery instead of political rhetoric. Patricia de Lille trended this week after she made a decision to resign as Cape Town mayor effective from October 31st. This follows a long legal and political tussle between de Lille and the DA. People on social media have called de Lille a sellout, while some have praised her. Kaizer Chiefs caused a frenzy on Twitter after they lost 3-1 to Wits at FNB Stadium on Tuesday. Wits were first with the early attacking foray when Thulani Hlatshwayo's shot from range shaved the wrong side of the post after the opening 10 minutes. Chiefs fans have called on the older players in the team to resign. As the SABC, we follow a mandate to give you, the public, a voice. And now it's time to have a look at what you have liked the most in the past week. The top stories on sabcnews.com as liked by users are NSFAS 2019 applications to be reopened, followed by EFF student command enraged by Maseko's death. The family's revelation that fees must fall protest took a toll on Professor Mayosi brought traffic to our website. And not forgetting EFF's Mbuyiseni Dlozi slamming Reform's opportunistic claims on Malema. That's it for your social media wrap. For SABC News in Johannesburg, I'm Lebo Changela.
Indeed, big stories, trending stories on social media. Nothing beats getting the next big scoop of an artist who is expected to make it big in the entertainment industry and to have an ongoing working relationship as their star rises. How do artists navigate the ever-changing media landscape? Is the media a stumbling block or does it support artists? Let's try and unpack this with Bonginkosi Ndiwane, who's a freelance journalist and blogger from an online lifestyle publication, The Bravado. Yeah. Bongs, good morning to you. Thank you very much. All right. So really the story that we are focusing on is the story of the late Pro Kid. But broadly, let's look at the media relationship between the artist and, of course, and the media as well.
Yeah. Well, the relationship, it's a very... It's a nuanced relationship, you know what I mean? It's a very shaky one as well. We have a good relationship, the media and artists do have a good relationship, but I think that our media is very... We only talk about them when they're gone, you know what I mean? And the problem is that there's a sense of lazy journalism on our part, is that we're not proactive, we are reactive to everything that's happening, you know what I mean? Yeah.
But it doesn't start when they are gone. You need to build an artist. It starts way before they are gone, way before their star has shown. It starts as they start their career. Just talk to us about that particular relationship.
Oh yeah. Well, it's a very weird one because our media is, say for example, I'm working for a publication. When I pitch a story about someone, say from Tembisa, an artist from Tembisa who's unknown, my editor will say to me, hey, they'll give me the so what factor. Why are we writing about this artist? So, because our media is very, we live in a capitalist system. I think it's also influenced by that as well. So it's all about, hey, we want the hits. We just want to talk about people who are going to make us buy, who are going to get us more sales, you know what I mean? So it's that's the thing, yeah.
So you agree then with the sentiment that media would build an artist at times, but also media can actually destroy an artist.
Truly, yeah, we do that, and I think it's bad because we only focus on one, because news is like you guided by news values, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes it's made we only focus on conflict. We don't focus on other things, we only focus on the conflict, or the one value on conflict. So we'd only want to report on someone only when they've done something bad, you know what I mean? So 2 weeks ago, say for example 2 weeks ago, if I pitched a story about Pro Kid, no one would have wanted us to run that story. But now, because he's no longer, and you know what I mean, it's trending now, you know, yeah.
And during the artist adversity, how does the media deal with that? I mean, do you report about an artist when he's down and out, or really you tell what you see?
Yeah. I think it's the whole. It goes back to the whole thing about lazy journalism. So if journalists are not asking the right questions, we won't get the real story, you know. So people will only focus on what's trending. I think as journalists we need to be the ones who spark the conversation. We need to engage the artists for just more than just the superficial stuff. You need to go deeper, ask how they are, you know what I mean? And there's a trend on this week about Pro Kid. Everyone is saying, oh, we failed him. Had the journalist actually 2 weeks ago or a week ago actually just done an interview with Pro Kid just to catch up and see how his career is going, maybe we'd have an idea what's going on in Pro Kid.
Is there space for that though in the newsroom to keep tabs on everyone that you've covered over the years?
There's no space. Like, you know, it's because of this capitalist system we're living in. There is no space for it. People will tell that, oh, we have no space because of advertising. You know what I mean? And it's sad, but at the same time, I think we should do more as journalists. I think there's a sense of lazy journalism on our part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would have read today's newspaper article talking about ProKid in particular, and you get a sense that what we got throughout the week when he passed away is different from what we're getting today. You hear of a ProKid who was troubled right at the end of his life, a ProKid who allegedly used drugs a great deal and so on and so on. But the family says no, there's no such. So how do you balance that as an artist? I mean, during this time of mourning, and report objectively but also truthfully.
It's you have to be very assertive, and you also have to have a sense of, because as a journalist you always have a sense, you know what's going on. It's just innate, you know, you have a sense, you feel things, you know. So your reporting also has to be guided by that, about how you feel, and how you have to engage things more than just like I said, more than just the superficial things. You have to just go in deep and then just report truthfully, and it has to be balanced as well, you know what I mean? And it's just, yeah, you have to keep that balance.
You know, with the advent of social media right now, artists themselves are in control of what is being said. Is the mainstream media then worried that you know, they will not have a say in building or destroying, as it were, artists?
I think you have to, as journalists, we have to be savvy about how we report and how we go about things. So an artist would post something on social media, but I think as a journalist that you have to you engage the artist, you find out what's going on, and you build from there. So an artist might might tweet something, and as a journalist, you don't just take that tweet and just run a story from that. You have to now do research, you know what I mean, and engage the artist, engage people around the artist, talk to the managers, talk to what's happening, you know, and now with ProKid, and people are saying he was on drugs, he was this. We don't know. We don't know. Truly, only people around him know what really happened, you know. And I last saw him at Basha Uhuru, I think at the end of June, and I wrote a piece about it on our publication, and I was saying that he looked like a very young man, looked like a young ProKid, you know. And it's just we have to balance things, I think. Yes, our reporting
and our media just supporting local artists. What can you say about that? Is there full support for local artists?
There is to some degree, but I think the problem as well is that we've gotten to a point where we have celebrity journalists who are friends with celebrities, you know, and we don't. So it gets to a point where the reporting is not as good. So the relationship is not as good as it should be. You know what I mean? The stories are not as good as they should be, because now the journalists are friends with the artists, and now we can't be fair, we can't be balanced, because you're thinking of, hey, I'm friends with ProKid now, what is he going to think if I'm going to write so and so? So it's, yeah, the relationship is good, I think it's a decent relationship we have with artists.
All right, gonna have to leave it at that. Bonginkosi Tiwane, thank you very much. A freelance journalist and blogger from online lifestyle publication The Bravado. We'll be crossing to Harare shortly, where Peter Ndoro is standing by. That's coming up next.
Fired! Unfair dismissal. Car accident. Court appearance. Let Trantel Legal tackle your legal problems. Whether it is a car accident, unfair dismissal, uncontested divorce, unfair blacklisting, or a wrongful arrest, we have tough professional lawyers standing by to assist you.
With the help of Trantel Legal, I kept my job and I can support my family.
I definitely got value for money. It didn't cost me a cent, just my monthly premium.
There was one man with his lawyer against a big bank, and I won.
Car accident. Faulty goods or bad service? You fired! Unfair dismissal.
No matter how big or small your legal problems, don't tackle them by yourself. Trantel Legal will do the tough work for you. SMS RIGHT to 32281 and we'll call you back.
Welcome back. Zimbabwe President-elect Emmerson Mnangagwa was expected to be inaugurated today, but the MDC leader Nelson Chamisa is contesting the outcome of last month's election results. Peter Ndoro is in Harare to unpack the state of the media in Zimbabwe following this announcement. Good morning to you, Peter.
Good morning, Bongi. Thanks very much for joining us here in Harare. There's a little bit of a breeze, but it's a lovely Sunday morning. And it's usually quiet, but I think it's even quieter because Zimbabweans have gone to holiday spots, given the two public holidays that are kicking off tomorrow and Tuesday, Heroes Day and the Zimbabwe Defense Forces Day. But I am joined by two people that are very interested in the media, one a media practitioner and another one that monitors. But just before I introduce them, just to let you know that we did reach out to the public broadcaster, the SABC, as well as the biggest state-owned media newspaper, the Herald, to join us. But unfortunately, we couldn't get much success there. But let me introduce my guests, Patience Zirima, who's the director at Media Monitors Zimbabwe, and Foster Dongozi, who's the Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Union of Journalists. To both of you, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Morning, and thank you.
All right, let me start with you, Patience, because you've had an opportunity to monitor the media over a period of time, various media, print, online and television, particularly in the election period. What are the big trends and the things that you observed?
Generally, there has been very unfair and balanced coverage, especially of the different political parties. If you look at how the media has been covering the main political parties, ZANU-PF, MDC, they get the majority of coverage. You'll see that generally throughout the period, there is over 80% coverage of these two big political parties and very little on the very smaller political parties. So that is one of the biggest issues that we're seeing. However, there is the lion's share was obviously given to the ruling party, ZANU-PF, and much more to the incumbent Emmerson Mnangagwa. So there was so much more coverage of the ruling party and their candidate, their presidential candidate. And we found that even when you're looking at political adverts, they were dominated by ZANU-PF. Over close to 98% of all adverts in the print and broadcast media was on Emmerson Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF, so this was quite a big challenge. However, you'll find that when we look at, there were differences in terms of coverage in the print media and broadcast media as well. In the print media, the Herald and the Zim Papers publications definitely were covering the ruling party much more. 80% plus of their coverage was on the ruling party. The private media was quite more balanced, although you'll find an interesting trend was that ZANU-PF and Emmerson Mnangagwa even got the highest amount of coverage in those private media as well. So this was quite interesting for us. Yeah.
All right. So you're a journalist, and you've worked on both sides of the fence, private and the state media. And I wonder, from a journalist point of view, why was it that if you could pick up a newspaper and look at the headlines, you can almost tell which was state media, which was independent? As much as people might say the state media was captured by the state, it looks as if some people could say that the independent media was captured by the opposition.
Yes, thank you. And that is a very correct observation. But the thinking amongst many journalists, particularly in the private media, is that if the public media is going to write just about anything and everything about the ruling party, stroke government, then somebody needs to tell the other side of the story. That has been the thinking. But going forward, there's been a realization, particularly from the private media, that beyond taking sides with the opposition, there's a genuine need for professionalism, and this they've really tried. Of course, there's also the stick that comes with getting advertisements from public institutions and so on. Although that has not been said publicly, but I'm aware that in some countries, particularly in Africa, in Southern Africa, threats to withdraw advertising, including licensing, by the way, has always been like the sword that hangs over some publishers. So hence the need to sort of try and move towards the middle of the line, as opposed to continuing to be perceived to be on the side of the opposition.
Patience, talk to me a little bit about the tone and the quality of the journalism that you observed over time.
Tone of coverage, I think generally there's been coverage has been very neutral, very professional in terms of how the media has been presenting issues. But of course, we look at pretty much, if it's a news bulletin, it's the whole bulletin, a newspaper, the whole newspaper. It's very different if you look at the front page coverage alone. If you look at the front page coverage alone, it's been you'll find that a lot of stories are very insightful on both sides of the divide, whether it's by the ruling party or opposition political parties, and how these are perceived by the different media houses. You find if you pick up a state-owned or state-controlled publication, it's usually very positive on the ruling party, very negative on the opposition. If you pick up a private media, a private publication, the opposite is true. Very negative around the ruling party, quite positive around the opposition. However, you find that with the, as what Foster was saying, the coverage of opposition is not always positive all the time. There's a lot of criticism for both sides, whether it's the opposition, whether it's the state. But I would say that if you look at holistically, what we noted was that outside the front page itself, there was quite a lot of neutrality, a lot of balance, but the front pages are something.
So the front page was to sell the paper?
Yes, it needs to sell the paper, which I suppose that's why you find that there is a lot of insightfulness. There needs to be some kind of sensationalism sometimes that sells just by the headline, and sometimes the story itself might not even be what you find in the headline.
All right, so take us back in time, Foster, and how far has the life of the journalist gone? There was a time when journalists' lives were threatened, some died, there was continual harassment. Have things changed?
Well, yes and no, and we continue to be what are known as frenemies with the government. One time we are friends, one time we are enemies, and which is a reflection that it's an up and down kind of setup. As we were leading, let me say, following the military intervention, there was so much good feeling that let us all do things properly post Robert Mugabe. And so there was a real push towards being professional towards journalists. But of course, all habits die, and suddenly, as soon as we went into election mode, the true colors of politicians or political parties started coming out. We started hearing a lot of bizarre and ludicrous things coming out of the mouths of politicians. But the spike was when, I think it was the 1st of August, when there was a march in town, I think by the opposition supporters, and quite a lot of journalists were beaten up by people wearing military fatigues. I've heard somewhere that some of them may not have been genuine soldiers, but these people were holding AK-47 guns, which are not available over a supermarket counter, so I'd want to believe they were soldiers. And there was a lot of abuse of our members, of journalists. And before that, there was also an attempt to call off a press conference. But what we found very assuring was that the president or the president-elect made an intervention through his Twitter to say this was unacceptable. And so for us, although there may be remnants or people that may not want to behave properly towards the media, I take comfort, some form of comfort, in the sense that no less than the president-elect tried to make an intervention.
Talking about the president-elect, the access that you have to him, once this drama played out, there was this relationship that he had with all the press. The international media seemed to be writing positively about what's happening in Zimbabwe, and then things changed, particularly when the army started shooting people in the streets. And I just wonder, when we saw the president speak to the media, he began with the international media. We didn't see him so much on the local media initially. Tell us a little bit about access and his speaking to the international media often first?
Well, thank you. He actually has been a regular guest of the Union in his previous life as a Minister of Justice. In fact, he even came up with suggestions on how to self-regulate. You know, it's talking about how the media needed to self-regulate. This was when he was a minister. Even when he was Vice President, he was he attended one of our events, and so I think the things developed very fast. But we do hope, that he will continue to avail himself. Assuming he continues after the court challenge, because more often than not, as you are pointing out, it is the trend with African leaders that they avail themselves to international media, New York Times, as if Zimbabweans or South Africans or Ugandans read the New York Times in large numbers. So certainly one of the things that we want to encourage African leaders is that they also need to be available to the local media, which is consumed by their local people, because you can make a very good guest to Americans and the British and Australians without your own people accessing or knowing you. So one of the things that we hope we will be able to get from whoever emerges as the leader of Zimbabwe is that you need to be accessible to the local media, because those are the people who are carrying your message to your voters.
Okay. We've run out of time, but very quick question for you, Patience. Democracy, one of the pillars is a good and functioning media. Do you think journalism in Zimbabwe is helping deliver the democratic project?
Yes, I believe that it is, although I still believe that we really need to have a more diverse media, which is one of the biggest challenges that we have in Zimbabwe. We have very limited diversity, with the state having overly too much control around the media, and in terms of ownership, control, etc. So this, for me, I think is a big challenge, and the more diverse and more independent the media is, the better our democracy is going to be.
To both of you, thanks very much indeed for joining me. Patience Zirima, Director at Media Monitor Zimbabwe, and Foster Dongozi, Secretary General, Zimbabwe Union of Journalists. Thank you both for your time. All right, okay, so that's where we're going to leave our coverage for this morning on Media Monitor here in Harare in Zimbabwe. So interesting developments taking place in the media space, a very important pillar for the democracy of the country to flourish, and it looks as if we're moving towards the right direction here, but we'll keep a monitor of the situation here. But in the meantime, we go back to you, Bongi.
Thank you very much, Peter. Media Monitor in Harare. Media Monitor here in Johannesburg. We'll be talking to Glenda Daniels shortly, and Lisa Vetten as well. Coming up next.
We're going to wipe the floor with them. And you're going to pay my costs for the next 20 years.
I'll see you in court.
You and who?
You don't want to end up in court. But when you do, let Clientele Legal tackle your court appearance for you. We have a nationwide panel of attorneys standing by to assist you. SMS COVER to 32281 and we'll call you back.
SABC News celebrates Women's Month.
Welcome back. We now continue with the discussion about the challenges faced by the media in Zimbabwe. Professor Glenda Daniels is with the SANEF Diversity Ethics Committee. She's the chair there and Media Studies at Wits University. And Lisa Vetten is a gender violence specialist, Wits Institute for Social and Economic Research. Let me start with you, Professor Daniels here. Your views and your thoughts on what's been said there by Peter and his guests.
I think his guests may have played it down, how bad it is in terms of media, because the majority of media in Zimbabwe is owned by the state. actually. It's not privately owned. A lot of privately owned media and journalists have been hounded out of Zimbabwe for the past 25 years. They broadcast radio from London, they do online publications. It's not that easy for journalists to operate in Zimbabwe. So there are a few newspapers. Newsday, I think, is one of them that's privately owned. I think it's by Ngube. Trevor Ngube used to own the Mail and Guardian. And from time to time, these journalists get hounded, they get thrown into jail. The problem, like if you have to compare South Africa and Zimbabwe, we have a system where the free flow of information is promoted. Our constitution talks about freedom of expression. We have a whole host of laws in South Africa which promote freedom for journalists and independence and diversity of news. Zimbabwe's laws actually don't even do that. They do the opposite. They actually restrict the free flow of information. The PIA we have, the Promotion of Access to Information Act in South Africa, they've been struggling for 30 years to have such a law.
So how effective and accurate is it then to report remotely?
For us to report.
For the media, the private media in Zimbabwe that is no longer there, that fled and is reporting from other countries. In London, for instance, you find a lot of Zimbabwe media outlets. In South Africa as well, you find a lot of them, and in neighboring countries. But they're not on the ground, they're not getting the story firsthand.
Very, very difficult. I really take my hat off to those journalists from Zimbabwe who are trying so hard. It must be really difficult because they're getting second-hand information from SMSs. You know, people. There's a vibrant citizenry there, and they are busy sending out messages via SMS, mainly WhatsApps, to people, and that's how they get the information, whether they're in London or Johannesburg. And then even in Joburg, when we're trying to hear what's happening with Mangwagwa, why is there a delayed inauguration? What is the MDC actually saying about the so-called rigging? You know, why did the EU say it was okay and then say, but the state media didn't give information? There are a whole lot of questions that we have about Zimbabwe that are not being answered because of the kind of reportage that you're talking about. We don't have, South Africa doesn't have bureaus there. At the moment.
Perhaps with the new dawn, as it were, we might see a lot of media outlets setting up shop there. Before we go to the newspapers, I want us to do that quickly. But Lisa, let me just come back to you. You raised a very important issue earlier on as we were chatting, the issue of the voice of ordinary Zimbabweans here in South Africa. Our media has not really gone in deep into that and just asking questions. Why do you have qualified teachers working in restaurants, for instance, here in South Africa? Doctors, even, you find them working at petrol stations as attendants.
No, you do, and I think while we might not necessarily have a good picture of what's going on the ground in Zimbabwe, all those people have families and are connected to people back in Zimbabwe and can often be quite a valuable source of information for what's going on. Plus, I think there's the way they feel about having seen the election results, just having spoken to a couple of my friends, a sense of despair. That actually that the change by the removal of Mugabe is not really a change. All it's changed is the face at the top. For the rest, politics remains exactly the same. So I think for some people there was that hope initiated by the change last year, but the elections reinforced that nothing's actually changed. So I think there could be some very good insights offered by interviewing Zimbabweans in South Africans and what their families are saying and what they think and what they feel about the results.
All right, let's go through some of the newspapers then in Zimbabwe and see what is going on and perhaps try and analyze that. Let's look at the Sunday Times saying that big guns fight poll result in top court. Of course, we know that Advocate Dalimpofu and Advocate Ngugai Tobi also are backing the MDC there. All right, let's look at another one. Zim pays $200 million to white farmers. So what do you make of this story? We've not read it in detail, but it's a story that has been there with us. You talk Zimbabwe, you talk farm, you talk land.
Some change. So in other words, what the story is trying to say to us, there might be some, not reversal of expropriation without compensation necessarily, but they are trying to woo white farmers back into Zimbabwe. So there might be some, it it's the same old as you're saying, because it's still ZANU-PF, and a lot of people who I know in South Africa, a lot of Zimbabwean professors are feeling very despairing about why there isn't real change in terms of party change. But maybe there's some nuanced change that's going on that we are missing. You know, in terms of media, the media analysts themselves were saying actually there's a bit of an opening up. Indeed, the fact, as you're saying, the fact that they were interviewed at all and talking could be some change. The fact that $200 million dollars are going, it's to woo back some kind of expertise, agricultural expertise that was lost when they pushed white farmers out.
Okay, all right, let's go on and look at the Newsday weekend. It's game on as Chamisa takes ED fight to Constitutional Court. We know for sure that he's challenging the results, Nelson Chamisa and the MDC Alliance as well. Let's look at the Gazette. It says business demands a revival of economy. Lisa, where are they going to start? Is it agriculture? Is it digital media? Where are they going to start reviving the economy there?
I wouldn't even begin to have an answer to that. The state of their economy is so bad that it's nothing you're going to be able to fix in weeks. This is going to take years to recover. I don't even want to comment, it's so depressing. Yeah,
here's another one, Daily News on Sunday, that I want us to look at. Angry ED hunts ZANU-PF rebels. Are we going back to the good old ZANU-PF in your views?
Well, you know, yes and no. I think he's tried. Tendai Biti was arrested and then he was released 24 hours later. As soon as he was arrested, I thought same old Mugabe tactic. Then he must have seen the media and he must have said, well, release Tendai Biti. So, you know, I think it's a sort of tug of war, up and down. But, you know, once a ZANU-PF commander, I mean, he was a chief that led huge massacres in Zimbabwe, and a lot of Zimbabweans know this. This person was responsible for a lot of deaths of people. So how do you radically change overnight to becoming a progressive leader when, you know, you've actually got blood on your hands, you've been a bully in ZANU-PF as well? I don't know. I don't have much faith in the fact that there's some kind of change in Zimbabwe. All
right. Here's another one, The Standard in Zimbabwe, saying a Chamisa case opens a can of worms. Petition anxiety grips ZANU-PF and ED ducks Chamisa's papers. I guess this is what is happening. Today it was supposed to be the inauguration of the president. It didn't happen because the MDC Alliance is challenging that. That's the story that will be with us until it's resolved, if it's going to be resolved anytime soon. Lisa?
Yes, I think the key emphasis is resolved anytime soon, because in a sense, you know, I wonder, even if they challenge and the outcome is in favor of the MDC, what will really change? I do think that ZANU-PF seems to have entrenched their grip on power so deeply that it's going to be very, very hard to unseat or change the culture to one that is more open.
Okay, quickly let's wrap up in just 30 seconds. Top stories for this week.
Women's Day. And I think some of the discussion that's going on, I mean, that's why we're here.
Until the Gender Summit.
Yes.
All right. To both of you, thank you very much for coming through. Highly appreciated. That does it for today's Media Monitor. My name is Bongikwala. Peter Ndoro will return next Sunday. Thank you very much for joining us. Till then, it's a goodbye from us.
awulahlanga mangabe copy off mojimile mashawo moya akuna showing off hustling ana vanilla essence manje dough flop bangistata bangireva bheka manje semglobe top kuPSL kumvela and ibench usafrefa nyabensela touch like jalo mangiscraper. You don't know the boo, just still faith da Lord have mercy manqala ngena kuwefa ngale ngoma. The aim is to shake the stadium, takisa to the greats in Rocker Stadium. I'm a bit so flat whenever ready must chabisa ukuthi ngidlile ngale stage crazy man bakshasha about to plan kanti